Boy, episode 7 sure had some problems. What did you think about it, Merv?
I thought it was fine. My horsey guy double jumps, king me. Welcome to Storytailers, where we discuss matters of story.
Because it's the story that matters.
I'm Merv.
And I'm Jason.
And today we're discussing Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens. Now, I really liked The Force Awakens, and admittedly a lot of it was nostalgia. But I really think Abrams did a good job capturing the fun and the adventure of the original trilogy.
Yeah, I would agree with that to a certain extent, but I did feel a little disconnected from this one.
Then fix it.
The one big problem is character psychology.
Okay, explain character psychology.
So the basic formula is motivation plus consistency. Motivation is the why of why a character acts the way they do, and that they're consistent with their behavior throughout the film.
Okay, so let's go through all the characters, or some of the main characters, and kind of use some examples so we can understand why this is a problem with them. Let's start with the protagonist of the story, Rey.
Sure.
What's her motivation?
It's sort of a big mystery. We don't know essentially her background. So she has a drive. She has a motivation. I want to stay on my home planet, and she's tempted outside of that in various ways. And we see her being consistent in wanting to keep going back to her home planet. But there's still a little bit of a problem in that that the mystery creates, and that's that she becomes a Mary Sue character.
Oh, define a Mary Sue character.
Well, Mary Sue character is basically a perfect character, a character who doesn't have any flaws. You can maybe think of your Ethan Hunt or your James Bond or something like that, where we know that the character is going to, succeed, get the girl, there's going to be unbelievable heroics involved. And with Rey, we see Rey battle, better than anybody in the First Order, essentially. Even though we haven't seen her trained to fight, she can fix things better than somebody who owns the machine themselves. Think of Han and the Millennium Falcon. Mm-hmm. And she can wield the Force more powerfully than a trained Force user like Luke in the first one, or Episode 4, that is.
So would you say she's a consistent character?
I would say she's consistent in her drive to want to get back home. I think the problem is we don't go back far enough into her history within this movie to be able to see the true motivation for her to want to go back home.
Yeah, Rey is a tough character because we don't know a lot of her history, and in theory she doesn't even know a lot of her history, but Kylo Ren is a character that you've had some problems with. You think he's a pretty consistent character overall?
I really like Kylo Ren as a character. I like most of these characters. I think they're interesting. Kylo Ren has a lot of emotional issues that adds a lot of depth to him as a character. So, I really love those moments when he seems to feel insecure, destroying the computers, or when Rey sort of challenges him, and even the moment in front of the helmet where he wants to live up to Darth Vader. There's an insecurity to that character that adds a lot of interesting layers.
The problem then comes from his motivation.
Exactly. We don't really know what drives Kylo Ren as a character. Now, we can say that has something to do with Han Solo, but what do we really see in the movie? We don't see any interactions between Kylo and Han. We get a bit of expositional dialogue between Leia and Han, where they were essentially explaining themselves as perfect parents, and Luke was training him, and there was nothing we could do. But if you have perfect parents and you have a good trainer, then what would seduce him to the dark side? What would be the problem there? And so his motives are unclear.
So you would like to see maybe a little bit more about Han in the past with Kylo when he was a child.
Right.
And how would you have that come? How would you fix that? Where would you bring that up?
Well, I think one thing that you could do with Han is to deepen his character maybe a little bit with Rey, since we don't see any interactions or flashbacks with Kylo Ren and Han. That could be delivered maybe in a more subtle way with his relationship with Rey.
Okay, how so?
Well, with Rey, what is she lacking? Well, she wants to get back home because her parents are missing. Han comes in and he almost acts like a surrogate father to a certain extent.
Okay.
Now, if Han were to have some internal struggle about his impact on Kylo Ren or his son Ben, that might go a long way to creating an arc for not only Han, but also for Kylo Ren. We understand that, oh, Han made some mistakes as a father, and this impacted Kylo Ren, and that bad relationship with his parent, father wasn't there enough, that sort of thing, caused him to rebel. And it makes sense when Kylo Ren kills him in the end.
Spoiler alert. So, I think a lot of that is that the filmmakers don't want to tarnish Han Solo, right? Han is a lot of people's favorite character. He's a swashbuckling kind of rogue with a heart of gold. But suddenly, if we make him a bad father, he's not as heroic, not as likable. And so maybe the filmmakers got caught up in a little bit too much of the myth of Han Solo as opposed to the story of Han Solo.
Right, which brings into, question Kylo Ren's motives altogether. Is it just become kind of the dark side is really powerful, and therefore people can get seduced by that, but why does he want more power? Why would he be seduced? Is it just this dark force that just seduces people, and by,
Maybe he was just born bad.
Born bad, yeah. I mean, I have problems with that myself. It doesn't do enough for me. I need motivation to be something that's explainable. It can't just exist.
What about his interactions with Snoke?
If I were going my interpretation, it would be that Snoke is the surrogate father. And the interesting thing about that, the scenes with Snoke, is that Snoke is presented as a very giant creature, and Kylo Ren is very small. And if we're thinking about the visual metaphor that might be here, it might be Kylo Ren is viewing from a baby's perspective and seeing Snoke as, a surrogate father.
Yeah, I mean, I loved a lot of the visuals in this movie, but I had a little bit of problem with Snoke. Just make a puppet. I mean, who's the best bad guy in all of Star Wars?
Darth Vader.
I mean, who's the best bad guy in all of Star Wars?
The Emperor?
I mean, who's the best bad guy in all of Star Wars?
Darth Maul?
I'm going to pretend you didn't. I mean, who's the best bad guy in all of Star Wars?
Boba Fett?
It's Jabba the Hutt. Just say Jabba the Hutt. I mean, who's the best bad guy in all of Star Wars?
Jabba the Hutt.
It's Darth Vader. See, the thing that made Jabba the Hutt so cool is that they used practical effects instead of CGI. They made a puppet. It took 3 puppeteers plus 2 assistants on top of people operating the radio controls for his facial expressions to make Jabba come to life. The reason practical effects work better in this instance is because our brain only has to make one step to suspend our disbelief. We know Jabba the Hutt isn't real, but there is something on screen that is, a puppet. If they had used CGI, our brain would know that thing on the screen is not real and Jabba the Hutt isn't real. So it takes our brain 2 steps to suspend our disbelief. So in my opinion, we should use practical effects, especially when building creatures. CGI has done a lot for film, but if you ask me, it should be relegated to explosions and buildings and things that we know exist so that our brain doesn't have to take those 2 steps. Okay, rant over. So, with Kylo Ren, we have a relatively consistent character. Finn's just a mess, right? Is he consistent?
So we've got motivation as maybe a problem with Rey, motivation as a problem with Kylo Ren. They seem to be fairly consistent with their drives. We just don't know enough about them. But with Finn, we don't know necessarily enough about his background, but he's also fairly inconsistent throughout. He is afraid at times, but yet he's very brave at times. He eschews violence, but then he partakes in violence and doesn't have a problem with it.
Yeah, he sees the family killed, and that's his kind of catalyst, but then a few scenes later, he's killing stormtroopers.
Right. Yeah, at the beginning, he gets the mark of blood on his mask, right? Not only separates him from other stormtroopers conveniently, but also shows that, hey, he's been marked by violence, and this, he's seen it for the first time, which he's been in part of the First Order. He's never seen violence before. I don't understand that either.
Right.
But, let's say suddenly had an awakening because a fellow stormtrooper died. Well, yeah, when he's battling stormtroopers lately, has no problem slicing one through the heart.
How would you fix either his motivation or his consistency?
I mean, I guess we don't necessarily know his motivation, but
I have a theory. I think he's probably Force sensitive.
Okay.
And that could have been explained, which would give him higher empathy.
I think that's great. If he becomes Force sensitive in the next movie, again, it's just another one of those things that isn't explained within the context of this film.
We've been saying that a lot.
We have been saying that a lot. We even get certain lines, like from the general, I don't remember, of the stormtroopers, whoever raised the stormtroopers. It's like he talks about this being a perfect system and nobody's ever broken ranks, and this is the first time for all of that. You might be able to fix that by just having his character be questioned somehow. This couldn't be the first time that he's felt empathy if he's Force sensitive, right?
Right.
And so what is the history there? They could have had a line there from the general that it's like, well, he had a couple of infractions, but nothing that set off any red flags.
Right. There's been some incidents.
Right. And so this is a culmination of some kind.
But would it fix Finn at all if, instead of focusing on him, what if there were other defectors? And then it wouldn't be such a jarring thing for Finn to be the first one.
Well, right, and it also gives him more of a drive to escape as well. I mean, if he knows what happens to people who try to defect, well, then the stakes are a lot higher for him to get Poe out and take that risk to try to get Poe out.
So how do you fix a character's consistency?
I think if we were to take your Force sensitive theory, if we understood his sensitivity to the Force and his capacity for empathy, it might help illustrate a shifting mindset. If he's brave at times for a certain reason, but that's still consistent to why he's also afraid. If you can sort of have a through line that would connect, it's like, okay, he can be brave in these instances or afraid in these instances, and it's still consistent with who he is as a character.
Yeah, like you give him a creed, like something that they live by. So we talked about Rey, we talked about Kylo Ren, we talked about Finn, and there's character psychology, the motivation, and the consistencies, and some of the problems there. But what's the big fix for Star Wars Episode 7?
I think the big fix that we're sort of hovering around here is that the movie needs to be more self-contained. Okay. So, like the original was self-contained, George Lucas didn't necessarily plan on there being sequels. The same needs to come into play here, where we get enough background about the characters to understand their drives, but, there's still things to be revealed later, just like with the first one.
Yeah, in A New Hope, we don't know who Luke's father is, but Luke still has a consistent motivation. I want to be like my father. I want to be a great Jedi like my father. He has this idealized version of his father being a hero, and that motivation drives him. He wants to be like his father. It really makes the reveal of who his father actually is more powerful, because Luke's whole motivation is driven by being like his father. But you think that the filmmakers in this instance are trying to hold back too much.
Yeah, there's too much convenience held back for the purposes of mystery. Her flashbacks are only flashbacks to the certain extent that we can see an arm holding her. We don't get the person who's holding her arm, and so therefore, tune into episode 8 or 9, right?
And if Finn is Force sensitive, that's something they're holding back.
Right.
Kylo Ren, his past, is there something they're holding back there?
Right.
With him and Han,
Luke and
Leia.
What do we know really at the end of the movie, even though Han dies and is a central figure within the movie? What do we really know about their past together? We just know what Han and Leia talked about in those lines of exposition. we were great parents, you know. I mean, they don't say it that way, but, you know, it's alluded to.
Yeah,
it's like,
I mean, it's
we did
exaggeration.
fine, you know, we were okay. You
We
know?
did what we could. We
Right.
did the best we could.
Right.
A little thing like Han saying, I wasn't a great father. I should have been there. Right? That would do two things. I liked what you said earlier about Han's character. This would not only give us some of Kylo Ren's motivation, help us understand why he's so angry, understand why he feels inferior, but also grow Han's character a little bit, kind of complete his arc from young, reckless swashbuckler to kind of an introspective older man.
Yeah, just those little seeds. If we had a line that indicated a bit of doubt within Han Solo's mind about, you know, his relationship with his son and his absence.
Yeah, if suddenly in Episode 8 we realize Han Solo wasn't a great father, that doesn't do much for us. It doesn't make us look at it a new way. It doesn't turn anyone's motivation on its head like it does with Luke. But if we get it in this movie, it completes that motivation for Kylo and for Han.
Right, which I think would be a real layer of growth. That's, you know, that you know, something you could do with that character before you kill him off to make that death more meaningful. Everybody's like that in their youth, right?
Right. I mean, we're all Han Solo when we're 17. I was 13.
Yeah, so we fix, you know, Kylo Ren as a character, but then we also add more depth to Han, and Rey connects to Han as well, in that she's looking for a father figure, and it gives Han that opportunity to perhaps give a few gestures of what he would have liked to do within that relationship. These are all subtle moves that could, with one thread basically, using Han Solo, that could connect, you know.
It almost give a redemption arc
Right.
for Han Solo. So to wrap up, we've talked a lot about character psychology and the motivation and consistency amongst the main characters in Star Wars Episode 7. And cleaning those up just a little would have went a long way to making this a great movie.
Yeah, I agree. Very well put, Merv.
Well, that does it for this episode.
If you liked what you saw, hit the like button.
And if you want some more, go ahead and subscribe.
And if you have a movie you'd like us to fix, put it in the comments below.
Until next time,
That's a wrap.